Something you might want to be aware of if you buy or sell on eBay. I'm going to start this with a transaction that I had a little while ago. I sold a cell phone to someone, and upon receiving the cell phone, this lady was angry that she needed a plan for the cell phone to make and receive calls. She thought it would just do that. And because she didn't want to buy a plan, she tried to return the phone to me. Now, I don't accept returns. My stuff is as is, no returns, and it is priced accordingly. Like, my stuff is rock bottom basement prices because I just want it to not go in the trash. So when I told this woman that I don't do returns, she immediately opened a case with eBay and said that the item was not as described. Now, eBay's policy, in case you haven't run into this, if this buyer says that the item was not as described, eBay will immediately find in the buyer's case and send them a shipping label, charge the seller for the shipping label, for the item to be returned to the seller, at which point the buyer receives a full refund and the seller is out shipping 2 ways for this item. Now, I contacted eBay at the time and I said, how can I prevent this in the future? Because I sold this item, I said no returns, and they lied, and I have communications between me and the buyer saying that they lied, and can you look into this? And eBay said, no, we don't look into this. The buyer gets a refund, and there's nothing you can do. And I said, how can I protect myself from this in the future? Because I can't do business like this. Here's the suggestion that I got. And I contacted eBay 3 different times to verify that this is what they want sellers to do. So the first thing you've got to realize about eBay is that most online retailers nowadays do free, no questions asked returns. Amazon very rarely charges return shipping. You get a free refund and Amazon just eats that, right? If you buy from Walmart, Walmart does free shipping both ways, just eats that. Even Temu will eat it most of the time. But with eBay, the seller is an individual person, and most individual people are not willing to eat that cost in order to keep the reputation of the platform afloat. But eBay still wants to compete on this front. So here's what they've come up with. And again, I talked to 3 separate customer service reps who all gave me this advice. To avoid this in the future, we highly suggest to offer 30-day free returns. This is a great way to increase sales and allows you to get to our top-rated seller status, which allows you the use of a partial refund tool and deduct up to 50% off a buyer's refund. This will compensate for some of the loss in value for the transaction. We also protect sellers that use this feature by automatically removing negative feedback for the transaction. Let me translate. If I say no returns, I'm not helping them compete with Amazon, so they're not going to have my back. But if I say that I accept free returns, I can then not do the free return. I can lie, say I got the item back damaged, give a partial refund, and eBay will then have my back. I contacted eBay again and again and again to clarify this, asking, you're telling me that in order to not be scammed, you want me to set up a trap first so that I can scam instead. And again and again and again, I was basically told yes. So when you see that a seller on eBay offers free returns, know that they only have to give you a 50% refund. eBay will back them in their decision to do that, and you will not be able to leave negative feedback, and neither will anyone else that they did that to.
Out of all races, what would you say is your least favorite race?
Listen, as a true Southern white male, my parents believe this. My grandparents definitely believe this. The worst race has to be the 43rd annual Daytona 500, February 18th, 2001. Turn 4, last lap, the day NASCAR died, the race that took Dale Earnhardt from us.
I know it's been a while. I have a word for somebody. I don't know who it is, but I was praying and God spoke this to me. I shared a part of these words before from a pastor that I love. Pineapples cannot grow in Alaska, but they can grow anywhere in Hawaii. To a seed, atmosphere matters. This word is applicable for many of you. God has put things in you, gifts, dreams, talents, desires. Where you are, those things are not coming to pass. They're not evident. They're not growing. You're not seeing fruit from your seeds that you've planted. Many people have stayed at the same church or in the same ministry and even a part of the same affiliations and friendships out of loyalty and obligation, but what God has put in you cannot manifest there. It cannot grow there. It cannot mature there. It cannot be what God intended for it to be there. Yet, you have not left because of feelings of guilt, feelings of shame, a burden to be loyal, a burden to remain, a burden to not leave, spiritual abuse and manipulation that tells you God says that this is where you need to be or you are not released to go by me. But in this hour, we need to be obedient to God above all else. And so I pray for you that you would be released from any feelings of guilt or shame or condemnation, that you would be loose from this mentality of loyalty that tells you that you have to stay at the same church and die there, never to become what God has called you to be. Many of you are spiritually dying out of loyalty and obligation when God called us to go. He never called us to stay in one place. I love you. I'm praying for you, child of God. Be blessed.
A quick guide to what it's like to leave the military at every rank. Welcome to Transition Assistance. Welcome to Transition Assistance. Welcome to Transition Assistance. Welcome to Deloitte. Welcome to Transition Assistance. Welcome to Transition Assistance. Welcome to Transition Assistance. Welcome to Transition Assistance. Welcome to Deloitte. Welcome to Deloitte. Welcome to Lockheed Martin.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of This Hurt My Feelings, so now I'm going to hurt your feelings too. Today I read a quote that said, "You weren't the problem, child. You were the child communicating the problem." Ouch.
Fact. This doesn't mean we're in a dystopia. It actually means 4 dystopias at the same time. It's Orwellian because the elite that control the healthcare system are also trying to control the news media's narrative. Like Orwell's Inner Party in 1984, there is no genuine communication between us, the average citizen, and them, the party members. The economic elite are in the pocketbooks of the inner party elite. It's Kafka-esque because, like Joseph in Kafka's The Trial, to do anything to change anything, you have to go through so much bureaucratic and legal red tape that by the time you've just filed one subpoena, they've already gotten rid of 20,000 people. That's, of course, not to mention all the red tape you have to go through just to find somebody in network, too. It's Huxleyan because all of the choices we're given, like the residents of Brave New World, are already prefabricated by an elite. They create a surplus of choice, which is utterly fake, given that a couple companies own the media, own basic goods and services, and own healthcare. Like the alphas, betas, and gammas who are all scientifically designed to have a part and parcel of their society, our systems create controlled desires and get parts of society addicted to different types of desires, such that when they get pre-existent conditions like diabetes or obesity afflicting over 2/3 of the American population, those same systems can then proceed to narcotically medicate those people on antidepressants, high blood sugar medication, and high blood pressure medication, because hey, it's one revolving door anyway. It's Phil Dickian because, like the elite androids dreaming of electric sheep, it's already come to a point where if you have those pre-existing conditions, you can get an abstract totalitarianism to tell you, that's just too damn bad. We're gonna get an AI to replace you soon anyway, so sucks to suck. But hey, at least you can be a data mine for them, like I'm doing right now and like you will be when you comment, because everything is now a space for reproducing the existing system through algorithmically trained large language models and convolutional neural networks. If I had to pick one, I'd say Huxley gives us the best understanding of the present, through the idea of a revolving door of profit that we can infer from his work. But who do you think gives us the best understanding, if you had to pick one? Let me know in the comments below.
Guys, I think I just found the main character. So this is Dr. Elizabeth Bick, and she is microbiology's answer to Jessica Fletcher, which means she basically rumbles research fraud for a living. Now, this woman is so good at her job that as of November last year, she was responsible for 1,069 academic papers being retracted, published academic research being fully retracted because she detected fraud in it. What? Okay, so what is Dr. Bick's origin story? Back in 2013, she was working at Stanford as a researcher and became interested in plagiarism in academic science. And this interest led her to find out that her own work had been plagiarised. So she did what any of us would do in this situation, I think, which was to download the book, forensically analyse the chapter over the weekend with a highlighter, and find out who else was being ripped off uncredited by these authors. And in the process of doing this, she was like, I have found my passion and my superpower. But she hasn't even discovered her biggest talent yet. This is like if Superman knew he could do the laser eye thing, but hadn't figured out he could fly. So in 2014, she's reading a paper that has an image called a Western blot in it. So Western blot is something like the blobby thing above my head. It's basically a way of reporting analysis on whether proteins are present and to what extent. And Dr. Bick looks at this Western blot in this paper she's reading and goes, I've seen that one before. What do you mean you've seen that one before? You've seen thousands of these. How can you possibly remember that? In fact, I don't think it's even the whole image she thought she'd seen before. It was a particular protein band with a dot at the end of it. And she's just like, hello, old friend. And this flicks a switch for her because who cares about plagiarism when you might have full-on fake scientific research out there? So she starts trawling through papers with Western blots in them, looking for duplications, edits, anything that looks amiss. And very quickly she realises this actually is not that uncommon. So she emails the editors of these journals where she finds irregularities and says, I think you need to look into this. Do they care? No. But that's not going to stop Bick. In 2016, she publishes this paper in the American Society for Microbiology. And it reports the results of analysing over 20,000 microbiology papers. These papers are from 40 different academic publications, and collectively 3.8% of them contain problematic images. And for at least half of those images, it looks like manipulation rather than a genuine mistake. So to give you a sense of how consequential faking Western blot data can be, it turned out that a really seminal paper published in 2006 on a particular protein implicated in Alzheimer's development contained fake Western blot images. And the effect of this isn't that Alzheimer's research is now on the wrong path, but the effect is that tons of resources were put towards building on an evidence base that wasn't actually there. Resources that could have been spent on other things that might have accelerated our understanding of Alzheimer's much faster. Okay, so let's bring it back to Bick. So the proper way to test for image manipulation is to use software that can detect it, but they find in the process of doing this that Bick can get it right 90% of the time just by eyeballing it. The implication of this is that across the millions of papers published in this domain, tens of thousands are going to be unreliable. But Bick doesn't stop there, because in 2019 she's like, I think I'm going to quit my job and just do this full time. Imagine being a microbiologist doing fraudulent research. And look, exactly as you would expect, not everybody is a fan of Elizabeth Bick. So she called bullshit on some COVID-19 related work led by microbiologist Didier Raoult. He called her a crazy woman. She posted comments on 60 of his publications. He teamed up with a colleague, Eric Chabrier, and together they doxed her online by posting her residential address and filed a lawsuit against her. But look, at this point, Bick has very much assembled the Avengers. She has 150,000 Twitter followers, many of whom actively help her to do this work. So stand down, lads, because I reckon she's going to win.
Homemade keto bagel bites. Let's see what they do to my blood sugar. These are keto bagel bites, and they're made with only 3 ingredients. I've seen this online for quite some time, and I'm really curious to see how they taste and how they're going to affect my blood sugar. They're very simple to make. Take 1 cup of almond flour half a teaspoon of baking powder, half a cup of Greek yogurt. Mix it all up and knead it for a few minutes. Then roll them into bite-sized balls. Now roll them in everything bagel seasoning and put them in the oven at 400 degrees for about 15 to 20 minutes. And when you're done, you get these homemade bagel bites. Now, I'm not sure how they taste. I'm a little bit skeptical. I don't think there's anything in here that will spike my blood sugar, but let's give them a try to see what they do. All right, it's been a couple of hours since I've had those bagel bites. I want to mention that they are delicious. They're crispy on the outside and tender and delicious in the middle. I'm actually quite surprised as to how good these turned out. Let's have a look at the glucose monitor to see if anything happened. There is absolutely no blood sugar spike. These are easy on my glucose and they're delicious. Stay tuned for more.
So the last couple of videos I've been talking about taking ownership of your life, understanding, authenticity and growth and those types of things. But let me tell you one of the hurdles on the journey that you're going to face. Loneliness. The path of growth is always full of goodbyes. I tell my patients this all the time. And you're going to feel like that, oh man, I choose me, I'm authentic, I do all these things, and all of a sudden, all these connections, these true connections that you've been longing for are going to happen. The truth is that there's usually a path of loneliness, and it's an indication that you're on the right path, not the wrong one. It's going to feel rough, but that's part of it. I think it's part of the test of authenticity, is that you're willing to be alone for a while, that you're willing to face the loneliness in order to choose you, right? And it'll be frustrating. In the algorithm on TikTok, I see a lot of dating stuff, or women that are upset about dating and men, and because I do a lot of men's mental health too. So I just want to say that it's true. Loneliness is going to be hard because you're going to want to connect with someone, or you want to have friends that are doing the growth too, or on the path of growth, or have cognitive flexibility, and all of these new things. And you got to remember that you're not only getting rid of a persona, a fake avatar that used to be you. You're shedding that skin. That also means that you're going to shed other people, and those people are going to want to pull you down. And the new connections that you start making, they're going to want, because they're not healing, or they're not as healed, or those types of things, that they will pull you down to their level instead of them rising up to yours. Because that takes effort and strength and all those things. So it's just the price to be paid. Anything worth the shit in your life is going to have a price. And this is going to be one of them on the path. So I've struggled with it. I know the feelings of I deserve to be chosen. I deserve, this and all of these things. But you can't force other people to do that. We don't control other people. It's really an indicator to double down and do the work even more. You can't seek it. It sounds weird and paradoxical. You can't do the motivation to improve to gain other people. You have to do it because it's the right thing to do for you. And then it happens, usually when you least expect it. So I know I struggle with it. It's one of the reasons why I moved to Hawaii. I knew I was going to be alone for a few years. I needed to do that work. I've come back to the mainland, starting to reconnect, and it's been beautiful. But it's been beautiful because my motivation was pure. I wasn't doing it because it will come across as manipulation if you're not careful. So I just wanted to make this video that, yes, I'm advocating all this growth. I'm advocating personal responsibility and authenticity and all of these things, but there is a price for it. And I wanted to recognize that.
From the get-go, it has always been very clear to me why Zuckerberg and his ilk would be in support of removing this application from the US market. Given the nature of the discourse on the platform, it's also not hard to figure out why many legislators would feel motivated to kind of strike this from the conversation, especially when you compare what goes on here with some of the recent terms of service alterations that have occurred on the platforms that are allowed to stay. But this thing has always bothered me, and I just figured it out. Why? Why are the DataSec folks so hardcore about this, especially NSA folks? Why are they so hardcore about this being an issue? Other applications harvest more data than this one, like by orders of magnitude, and they're not even part of the conversation. Most of that data is available on the open market anyway. So what's different? What's different about what's going on here? No, the answer is a scandal in data security and intelligence services that was aired not quite a decade ago, in which it was revealed in grueling, excruciating detail why. Taking a deep breath. Okay. Way back. Started in the late 90s, carried through into the early 2000s. There is a global race for what is going to be the encryption standard. How are we going to secure end-to-end communication? And there were quite a few horses in the race. One of them in particular, Microsoft uses it, Google uses it, Apple uses it. Virtually every application that you have installed on any device use it. Anytime you have a device that actually has hardware-based encryption, it uses this standard of encryption. This, for the record, is not me red stringing it together. This was in Wired for about a week. So were these market forces? Was this the result of everyone taking a look at this standard of encryption and saying this is the best? No, it was really, honestly, kind of a like choose your own flavor sort of deal. Every one of these different forms of encryption had different advantages. And the one that eventually won out is the one that was endorsed by what was generally respected as, and one of the more politically neutral global cyber intelligence services, Canada's. Which sounds all well and good until, decades later, it is revealed that the reason that they did this was to secure preferential information sharing with the NSA at the NSA's request. The NSA said, hey, we will share more data with you if you endorse this encryption standard. Because the NSA already knew how to bypass it. Ancient history, right? There's no way we're still using... Oh, no, we are. This, incidentally, is one of the reasons that I am a very, very strong advocate for don't presume that anything you do on any electronic device is secure. There's really no such thing as true data security. You think it's encrypted? That's great. Signal, by the way, also uses this encryption standard. So no. Every single device, every single bit of spy gadgetry, every software solution that has ever been sold to you under the guise of, well, this is secure. Well, yeah. Locking your door is probably a good idea, but it isn't going to keep the locksmith out, is it? I will give you one guess, and one guess only. Who did not actually sign off on adoption of that encryption standard? Two countries, actually. Iran never widely adopted the CSIS approved encryption standard, which is one of the reasons why Stuxnet was as audacious a move as it was, and one of the reasons why, frankly, it was so impressive that Iran caught it before it actually went off. But the other, of course, is China. Not Russia, incidentally. Most of Russia's IT infrastructure is, frankly, borrowed from us, which is one of the reasons why I personally think their investiture in psychological electronic warfare is ingenious. They're playing into a strength rather than leaning on a weakness. But China never bought into the encryption standard that CSIS's endorsement convinced most of the world to adopt. So maybe part of the issue here is less about what data is being harvested from us. Maybe it is less about the purported Chinese spy, and maybe it is actually a little bit more about us having an application in our hands that our spies can't read, that has messaging capability. It doesn't matter that our messages aren't actually encrypted. It doesn't matter if every byte of data on this thing is absolutely publicly visible. It doesn't matter if the entire database was theirs for the asking with a single subpoena. The fact that the technology exists at all has got to drive them crazy.
Things you didn't know that you didn't know, part 9. 75% of the mass of a human brain is made up of a substance called myelin. And myelin is made up 100% by cholesterol. I'll leave it there. On a separate and completely unrelated subject, Alzheimer's disease is a neurodegenerative brain disease which destroys brain cells. Now, Alzheimer's never existed until 1979, and yet now it is one of the leading causes of death in Western societies. On a separate and completely unrelated subject, margarine was first invented in 1869 because Napoleon wanted a cheaper and longer lasting fat for his armies to travel with. It didn't gain popularity until the Second World War, when butter and other animal fats were scarce. Grew in popularity in the 50s, but by the 70s the animal fats in it had been replaced with vegetable oils, because obviously animal fats contain saturated fat and a lot of cholesterol, so they wanted to offer a lower cholesterol alternative. I'll leave it there. On a separate and completely unrelated subject, margarine is one molecule away from being plastic. Now, as any chemist will tell you, one molecule can make a huge difference to the finished compound. Take ethanol and methanol, for example. One molecule difference, but very, very, very different results when ingested into the human body, right? So I'll leave it there. On a separate and completely unrelated subject, a simple experiment to do at home is to take a slab of butter, a slab of vegetable margarine with no animal fats in, and a slab of plastic, and stick them all outside in your garden and have a look what happens. Very quickly, all the wildlife in the area is going to be attracted to that butter, from the flies and the beetles and the mini beasts, through the birds, the rodents, all the way up to the apex predators, foxes, badgers, bears. If there happens to be no other wildlife around, then bacteria and mold will very, very quickly consume it, because it's easily digestible for all organic life forms. The margarine and the plastic will sit there for weeks. Nothing in nature will touch them. Try it. I'll leave it there. On a separate and completely unrelated subject, I invite all GPs out there to check your patients' medical records and see how many of your dementia and specifically Alzheimer's patients have been on statins and or low cholesterol diets for many years. I'd be very interested to hear your feedback in the comments, and I'll leave it there. Have a fabulous day.
This is one of those opinions that's going to get me JFK'd, and I am okay with that. Western psychology and therapy has bred a lot of abusers, manipulators, and gaslighters. Y'all have turned your sadism into self-care, your barbarity into boundaries. It just gave you the language to do so. Y'all would rather pick up DSM-5s than do a little self-reflection. You have learned to pathologize why you are a bad partner, friend, child, or parent. Instead of just saying, why would I want to help you move? You say, I don't have the space for that right now. Instead of saying, I don't want to listen to all the bullshit going on in your life, you say, I can't have you trauma dumping on me. There's a lot going on for me right now. Instead of saying, I don't like talking to you unless I need something from you, you say, I'm full at the moment. I'm at capacity for this kind of thing, but I'll reach back out to you when I can. Y'all are so anti-communal, and therapy is the perfect space for that under the Western model because it rewards hyper-individualistic behavior. Western therapy tells you it's all about you, babe. It doesn't look at anybody else around you. It insulates you. It's insular. Puts you in your bubble. It says you're the focus. It doesn't make you look outside of yourself. And y'all love that. It makes you bad people. It makes you worse people.
One time in the middle of class, the student looked at me and said, "Mister, you're like a really good teacher. I feel like you're wasting your talents here. You should be like traveling the country, teaching science to underprivileged kids." And instead of just saying thank you, I for some reason responded, "Actually, I moved here as part of a federal program designed to bring math and science teachers to Title I schools." What does that mean, Title I? It means that a certain percentage of our students are living at or below the federal poverty line. And their friend sitting next to her said, "Oh my god, we're the underprivileged kids."
Today I'm trying the viral cottage cheese flatbread to see what it does to my blood sugar. This is the viral and very popular homemade flatbread made with only 2 main ingredients. Simply add 1 cup of cottage cheese with 2 eggs and your favorite seasonings. Here I'm using half a teaspoon of garlic powder and half a teaspoon of onion powder. Finish with a little salt and pepper, then blend until smooth. Pour it onto a parchment-lined baking pan, and you can sprinkle some Italian seasoning on like I have here. And then bake in the oven at 350 degrees for about 20 minutes, or until the edges get brown and crispy like you see here. And the amazing part with this is that it actually has the texture of a flatbread. It's flexible, and you can make sandwiches out of it. We're not going to make a sandwich today. I just want to see how it tastes, and also how it affects my blood sugar. So let's give it a try. Alright, it's been a couple of hours since I've had the flatbread. I do want to mention that it did taste pretty good. I was concerned it might taste like an omelet, but it actually had the consistency of a flatbread, which was surprising. Is it worth making? I believe it is. I'm going to try it in a sandwich next. So let's have a look at the glucose monitor to see if it did anything to my blood sugar. Keep in mind, I only ate half of that serving. It was quite filling, and you can see that it did nothing at all to my blood sugar. It is a high protein, high fat food, and it seems to be quite easy on my blood sugar. Remember that individual results will vary. Stay tuned for more.
Courage is knowing it might hurt and doing it anyway. Stupidity is the same, and this is why life is hard.
So we all have this audio as our alarm now, right?
Good morning, you stunning stack of fucking sunshine. Rise and fucking grind. Do you fucking know what today is? Today's the day you remember who the fuck you are. You did not wake up today to be a weak-ass bitch. You're a fucking champion, and champions keep fucking going.
Literally the best thing to wake up to on the planet. I am tired of sharing the obligation for creating a society with fucking idiots. I am tired of people rejecting facts in favor of their preferred dogma. I am tired of people who believe that children dying is an acceptable cost in a free society. Whoa. I am tired of being drawn into discourse in order to feed a profit-driven algorithm. I am tired of everyone's voice being equally valid in a conversation. Everyone's voice is not equally valid in every conversation. Sometimes people know more than you about a topic and you should just listen. I am tired of people with no ideas shouting no at people with solutions. I am tired of people whose identity revolves around what they don't like instead of what they do like. I'm tired of the boring, predictable ways mass media routinely fails us. I'm tired of my own ways, big and small, that I feed into that system. But mostly I am just tired. Mostly I am just tired. Please be nice. Please don't be stupid. Please consider what you're really doing. Please, when something is nice, don't make it your first instinct to totally ruin it. Whoa. I am proud.
lying down with me, hand in unlovable hand, and I hope you die. I hope we both die.
I want to start this video by saying that I'm not asking for money and I'm not asking for sympathy. What I'm asking for is if you are a young 14, 16, 21-year-old girl, listen up. I drove to the grocery store. I need to grab some milk and bread and a couple things, flipped open the bank app on my phone, and I've been sitting in my car crying ever since because I never have enough money. And why do I never have enough money? Because when I was a 19-year-old girl, I fell in love. My Mormon faith told me that I was supposed to be a stay-at-home mom. I got married. I started having babies. I dropped out of college. I never had a career. My only jobs that I ever had in life were a waitress at the Olive Garden and managing a pretzel maker in a mall. Oh, my first couple years of marriage, I decided that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, so I bought a windshield business. I was 20. And my Mormon stake president reminded me that women weren't supposed to work, so I quit my own business, handed it over to my husband, took my name off of it. I would work our family business throughout the next 24 years of my marriage, but I never got paid. I didn't have a salary. My name wasn't on it. I literally worked for room and board. That's it. I would eventually also launch a custom home building company with my uncle as the architect and my friends as the builder, my designs, my realtor. But again, because my husband was the man, his name was on all of the projects, his name was on the business. I remember one of the last custom homes that I built, we sold it and made about a $260,000 profit. That money all went into his bank account. I didn't even have a bank account. I should have said that in the beginning. I never had a bank account. He would give me little envelopes of cash to go grocery shopping with. Anyway, that house sells, the money goes in the bank. I just asked if I could buy myself a piano with the money. I had worked on building that house for 2 years. All of the money went into his bank account. Nothing was under my name. I got a piano and I got a free house to live in. And I got groceries. So I found myself divorced at age 44 just 5 years ago, and within just a few months I was living in my car while he made about $250,000. He would eventually quit that job so that he wouldn't have to pay alimony and child support. He has only paid alimony one time ever in the 5 years since we've been divorced. Once ever. Right after my divorce, I remember being really confident about my ability to get a job, so I put together a resume. I remember one of the first interviews that I had as a management position for a windshield company, similar to the one that we had run. And the man actually laughing as he was interviewing me, like he was really sympathetic. He wasn't being a douchebag, but he was laughing. And he's like, so let me get this straight. You helped manage your family windshield business with your husband, but you were mostly a stay-at-home mom, and all you did was like the marketing and the hiring, firing, and some of the strategy for the business. But it became really apparent that I needed so many more skills to have any type of management job. I couldn't even like work the basic computers. He told me in the interview, please don't apply for any more jobs like this. You are not qualified at all. You're not capable of doing this unless you go back to school and get your degree or get some different experience. And so I ended up, my first job after my divorce was $11 an hour, 4 hours a day, working as an assistant to a school teacher in an elementary school. I made $44 a day. For 24 years, I lived in $1 million homes. I vacationed all over the world. I spent my summers in Hawaii. I could buy myself $500 jeans, diamond tennis bracelets. We had boats and RVs and whatever I wanted. And it never bothered me once that my financial security was dependent on that man being in love with me. I never realized that him liking me or not liking me or finding me sexy or attractive or interesting determined whether or not my children could eat, whether or not I could buy myself a fucking jug of milk and a loaf of bread. So I had my 5th surgery in 2 years, 2 weeks ago, and I'm supposed to be in bed resting, and I can't because I worked 7 days a week since my divorce 5 years ago, which is why I'm covered in paint and looking like crap. We actually have a 4-day weekend here in Tucson, and since my partner isn't working, he's working on furniture flip partner projects with me. I have no retirement. I have no savings, no education, no resume. I was almost a straight A student throughout all of my education. I went to college at age 17. I had dreams for my future. I'm working so hard to get myself out of just perpetual side hustle hell. There's not a day that goes by that I don't wonder why. Why I didn't have a fucking backup plan. Why my kids eating and having stability was dependent on a romantic relationship. Why nobody told me to put money in the bank. Why nobody told me don't have babies until you have an education and some experience. Don't have so many kids. I wish somebody had told me to put my name on our vehicle loans and to put my name on our houses. I wish somebody had told me that it's okay to put those babies in daycare for a couple days a week and go to college and have a job. And I think I need to do an entire like trad wife sequel, because you can be happy and rich and loving your life like Ballerina Farm until the guy walks out. I want you guys to imagine for a minute, even rich Hannah. If Deanna walked out, if all of his financial backing and he had to sell the farm, and then what does she have? Find another rich boy to marry? I just don't want one more woman to DM me, comment, send me their stories, cry to me about how hard it is for them to support their families, and I am so tired of living my own story. We have to make this stop. Raise your daughters to be financially independent. Focus on their futures and educations just as much as you focus on your sons. I wish that someone had done that for me.
And they do said, dance, magic dance, dance, magic dance, spell on me. Jump, magic jump.
And the Emmy Award goes to It's Bisan from Gaza and I'm Still Alive. AJ Plus reports.
Accepting the Emmy, John Lawrence, Senior Executive Producer.
The carpet bombings happened in the streets without any warning, and people are killed every single moment. This is a really tough day that Gaza are going through. They bombed the door of the hospital. They bombed. I've been there before 2 minutes.
We'd like to thank the Academy for this recognition. This award is testimony to the power of one woman, armed only with an iPhone, who survived almost a year of bombardment. Over 100 Palestinian journalists have been killed in Gaza, including several of our Al Jazeera colleagues. Our bureau in the occupied West Bank was shut down at gunpoint just last week. We thank you, our journalistic community, for this recognition for Bisan and for the AJ Plus team, and we urge you to join us in saying that journalism is not a crime. Thank you so much.
This graph illustrates how your retirement age directly correlates to how long you're going to live on this planet. The earlier you retire, the longer on average that you live. The more stress you accumulate from work, the earlier you will dig your own grave. Keep this in mind when you see politicians trying to pass bills to say that since the life expectancy has gone up, you need to work longer. On average, the longer you work, the earlier you die. Stress is a direct correlation to death. The more stress that you add onto your plate, the more health complications that you end up having. Living a stressful life, as you see people that retire around 49, 50, they live longer. They have more opportunities to do whatever the fuck they want. The longer that you are slaving away, the quicker you will dig your own grave. Your biggest takeaway there is, one, you need to figure out ways to make as much money as possible to help you retire quickly. Or two, if you're not worried about money, live a very simple life. The longer that you are working at your 9 to 5, whatever job you work at, the quicker that you literally will fade away.
Going through the data of every single swing state in the 2024 election, there is one very consistent question. I'd like to start in North Carolina. North Carolina overwhelmingly elected Democratic Governor Josh Stein with over 3 million votes. They elected a woman Democrat, Rachel Hunt, as the Lieutenant Governor, elected a Democrat as their Attorney General, Democratic Secretary of State. A Democratic woman lost in the Supreme Court race by 7,000 votes. And you get to the presidential race and Donald Trump won by 189,406 votes. Now what's interesting here, 356,884 people cast a vote for for president and did not cast a vote for governor. In 2020, North Carolina had a House race. The discrepancy there between the House and the presidential votes was 199,000. I'd love to hear from any of the hundreds of thousands of people in North Carolina that voted for Donald Trump and left the rest of their ballot completely blank. Next, let's look at Michigan, who elected to the Senate a Democratic woman in Alyssa Slotkin. 5,393,906 people voted in the Senate race. 5,641,411 voted for president. That is a difference of 247,505. I would love to hear from any of the 150,000 people that voted for Donald Trump and did not vote for Mike Rogers. You might ask, didn't Michigan have a Senate race in 2020? What was the discrepancy then? It was 59,282 people that voted for the president and did not vote for the senator. So a difference of almost 200,000 votes in that category, and another Democratic woman winning while Kamala Harris loses. And you know, it's funny you mention that, because let's take a look next door where a Democratic woman who was a lesbian, Tammy Baldwin, was able to win her Senate race as well. Funny enough, by just the right margin, is about 60,000 votes in Wisconsin for Donald Trump that didn't feel like voting in the Senate race. And I would love to hear from a Wisconsin Republican that voted for Donald Trump but didn't want to give their vote to Eric. In 2020, Wisconsin had a Senate race. The discrepancy was 14,990 votes between people that voted for the president and people that voted for the Senate. This year, it was 56,125. Now let's look at Nevada, a state that re-elected a Democratic woman to the Senate in Jackie Rosen. Once again, Donald Trump won by 46,000 votes. About 70,000 of those, it seems like they didn't fill out the rest of their ballot or vote for the senator. Isn't that interesting? Would love to hear from a Nevada Republican that didn't want to vote for Sam Brown but voted for Donald Trump. There are a lot of you. Finally, turning to Pennsylvania, 176,000 ballots cast a vote for president without voting for the Senate race, which is hotly contested. That Senate race was deeply cared about by both parties, incredibly well advertised on both sides. So much money went into those campaigns. Very interesting to see 175,000 ballots only voting for the president. Arizona is completely inept, so I can't analyze their data yet. Georgia did not have any kind of large election underneath the president that I could look at. Very interesting stuff. If you're one of the hundreds of thousands of ballots that decided this election that seemingly only had one line filled out, let me know in the comments your mindset and why you don't seem to care about anything else. Very interesting stuff.
As an atheist, you're still religious. How so? Well, you believe in science. You worship science. Your God is science. Our science, who art in reality, hallowed be thy facts. Thy studies come, thy proof be done, in time as it is in space. What are you? Give us this day our daily evidence, and forgive us our inaccuracies, as we forgive those who are inaccurate against us. Please stop. And lead us not to fairy tales, but deliver us from mythos. For thine is the kingdom, the phylum, and the species, forever and ever. Amen. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Seek ye first verifiable proof and the statistics, and all these things shall be proven unto you. Data be with you, and also with you.
Just see those sleigh bells jingling, ring, tingle, tingling too. Come on, it's lovely weather for a sleigh ride together with you. Outside the snow is falling and friends are calling you.
Run.
But I can guarantee you I would dog walk her in basketball, and I'm a 5'6" man.
There's a lot to unpack here, so bear with me. As soon as you said that you were 5'6", cut the tape. That's all I needed to know. You could dog walk Caitlin Clark. Let's start there. You couldn't dog walk a Pomeranian. 5'6", you'd blow away. Okay, you're not dog walking anything. You Googled yourself in this video, which made my job a lot easier. I also Googled you. And let me just say this, credit where credit is due. This guy can hoop. He did Google his high school stats, which I did find to be interesting. But I Googled them as well. His senior season, I'm assuming it's his senior season. Yep. Oh, we're the same age, Matthew. Would you look at that? His senior season of high school, he had 804 points for an average of 28.7 points per game. Dude can score. But not only can he score, he averaged 6.11 rebounds and 7.36 assists. So his senior year of high school, he was averaging 28, 6, and 7. That's really good. Do you see how easy that was, Matthew? Do you see how easy it was for me to give credit where credit is due? To objectively look at your statistics and see and acknowledge and say out loud, this guy is good at basketball. And I don't even really like you. You know what I mean? Like I came across your video. I see, yeah, this is probably not somebody that I would like. And still, objectively, I can look at your statistics and say, this guy is good at basketball. So I didn't stop there because, again, I only know what you did in high school. And seeing as you're stitching a video about Caitlin Clark, who is dominating Division I college basketball, I wanted to dig a little deeper. Because honestly, like the energy in that video was giving like, I was going to go D1, but then I blew out my knee, you know, like it's giving peaked in high school. I'm just saying. And even just like scrolling through your videos, like all of your videos are of you playing basketball at the rec league, and you're good. Like, don't get me wrong. I love that you love basketball. I love that you are still continuing to play basketball, but like you're just seeping bitterness and insecurity out of yourself in that video. And I just want to know why. And using our context clues, one could assume that it's because you wanted to play basketball professionally, and for whatever reason, you were not able to. So anyway, I kept digging, and I see that you did play basketball, college basketball, at a community college, which makes sense. Which, don't misunderstand me, no shade to community college at all. Playing college basketball, any sport in college at any level, is impressive. I understand that, okay? I'm just simply making an observation. I see that you played 2 years-ish at a community college, and then you signed at a NCAA Division II university. Awesome. I played Division II basketball. I didn't go to community college first, but I did play Division II basketball as well. So I looked up this university that you had signed with, and I looked up the rosters. We're the same age, remember? So I know what years you were in college. I went there, looked up those rosters, only you weren't there. I never saw you on those rosters. So then I stumbled upon a Facebook page, and you're posting video clips of you playing basketball in the years 2016, 2017, 2018. And I'm noticing that it's not seemingly at a university. And in one of your posts, you mentioned something about the FBA. So I Google FBA basketball, and I see the Florida Basketball Association, Florida's League of Opportunity. And it goes on to say, with very limited opportunities to play in the NBA, a concerted effort has been forged to provide exceptionally talented players with a platform to pursue basketball as a vocation after college. So I was right. You had league dreams. You had champagne taste on a beer budget. You had 6'9" goals and a 5'6" frame. And so now you hate people who get to live out those dreams that you had. And specifically and especially women. Because while you have this insecurity and bitterness and, you know, hoop dreams that never came to fruition over here, you also have this misogyny and this sexism and this other just filth that you need to internalize and process. And so you do things like post clips of you playing basketball at the rec center, and you post them to your platform with over 500,000 followers, who I'm sure 90% of are men. And you pretend to not know who Caitlin Clark is and proceed to say that you could dog walk her and do all of these things. And my question for you is just like, what do you gain from that? Like, I'm genuinely asking, what does that do for you? Let me say this. I am not trying to like embarrass you or drag you. I'm not making fun of you for playing community college basketball. I'm not making fun of you for maybe not playing Division II basketball. I'm not making fun of you for playing in the FBA. Like, I'm not doing any of those things. But what I am doing is I'm challenging you to look within yourself and just ask, like, what is it about me that makes me so bitter and so insecure and so incapable of seeing somebody else succeed, seeing somebody else living out their dreams, and instead of just being happy for them and celebrating them, or even turning the other cheek at the very least. Instead, you feel that as like a personal attack on you. And I just want to challenge you to look within yourself and discover why that is. And one last challenge for the road. I want you to think of the closest woman to you in your life. Could be a mom, sister, friend, cousin, aunt, girlfriend, wife, daughter. Think of the closest woman to you. Now imagine that she is incredibly good at something, that she's worked her entire life, blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice, spent so much time, money, effort, all these things. And subsequently, she is one of the best in the world at this thing. And then imagine that some random person comes on the internet and says that he's better than her, that he doesn't know who she is, which is like pretty much impossible, that he could dog walk her, blah, blah, blah. Just discredits all of these things that she's done. How does that make you feel? My guess and my hope is that it makes you feel a little bit bad. Like, I hope you feel sorry for her, that she doesn't get any of the credit, that she's just being diminished simply because of the fact, let's call a spade, that she's a woman. And my real hope is that the next time you record a video like this, that you think of that woman in your life and think, if I were saying this about her, would I feel good about that? Because here's the thing, you are talking about her. That's all I'm saying.
So I just had the funniest realization that I think I've maybe ever had in my life. Yesterday, Candace Owens did like this long 25-minute segment about me on her YouTube channel. It was an experience. My husband watched the video, my podcast co-host watched the video, and then I finally watched the video. It was rife with factual inaccuracies, obviously. And I did a long video explaining like some of those inaccuracies about my book timeline, and also just about the fact that Candace Owens hides the fact that we know each other. I worked for her, unpaid. But none of that today. What I want to talk about is something that I realized this morning. So last night I watched the video, and she watches a ton of my TikToks, right? And a lot of the TikToks have to do with my argument that there is a connection between the loss of reproductive rights and the interest in the trad wife life. I talk a lot about Roe v. Wade, I talk a lot about abortions, all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, Candace starts talking about the Roman Empire. She was like, I don't understand the connection she's trying to make. This is so complicated, and help me make it make sense. And she was like, you know, the Roman Empire didn't fall because of traditional families, it fell because of the gays. And I was like, wait a second, how did we get to the Roman Empire? And honestly, it was such overload watching that video. Like, it's such a weird thing witnessing yourself be the target of one of these things, because like everything is taken out of context intentionally, that you're kind of on overload. And so I just like didn't have time to process it. And I woke up this morning and I was like, oh my God, she watched countless of my videos talking about Roe, and still somehow heard the word Roe and thought at one point that I said Rome. Let's roll the clip.
She gets really deep in this 36-part series. She even realizes that it's trad wives exactly like the fall of Rome. Take a listen.
You're not going to believe this. The synchronicity is honestly mind-blowing. I just found out that today is the 51st anniversary of Roe v. Wade. And these are the messages that I am getting today from fans of Ballerina Farm. I dare you to tell me that there's no connection between the rise of trad wives and the fall of Roe.
I accept the dare. There is no connection between the rise of trad wives and the fall of Rome. Like, what are we even speaking about? But it's incredible because they're so complex and there's just nothing there. There's nothing there. The fall of Rome actually could be attributed to the exact opposite, when society moved away from tradition and everybody became gay. Like, I just don't know how you're able to connect Ballerina Farm to the fall of Rome, but who cares? Whatever, she's having a good time.
Oh my God. And I asked my husband about it this morning and I was like, did you make the connection that when I said Roe, she thought I was saying Rome again and again? And he was like, oh my God, no. She was talking so quickly that I just kind of assumed she was misinterpreting something you had said about the Roman Empire. And I was like, don't make fun of my wife. And we were just dying over coffee this morning. Like, did you even watch the video twice? Did an assistant even watch it for you to come to the conclusion that after videos and videos and videos of me talking about trad wives, talking about reproductive rights, I would suddenly be talking about Rome? It's just so fucking funny. And I have to say, there is so much malevolence with the right-wing grift, obviously. And there is a whole lot of discomfort that comes with being the target of it. And I will say that. I talk about that more at length in my longer video. You can watch that. But there is this little silver lining of this. There is this moment when the clouds move and the sun comes out. And it's when you realize how dumb the arguments being made in these videos are. She thought I was saying Rome. She bypassed the far more obvious reference, Roe, one of the most famous pieces of landmark legislation in this country. She missed all the contextual clues and she went to Rome. And I woke up this morning with like a little bit of stomach ache, like a little bit of anxiety just from receiving like so many mean comments, and I feel great now.
I just got off the freeway and we need to have a discussion. There are too many people in the left lane with no left lane ambition. Like, what's going on? The left lane is for criminals. The left lane is for deviants. The left lane is for vigilantes. What you doing there, baby bird? You don't need to be there. You take your time. You think things through. You're very demure. Whatever the kids say. You need to be in the right lane with all the other bumper cars. Left lane, that's big bitch territory. Okay?
This may very well be the last post I ever make on this platform, and I'd love to leave you all with a message of hope and positivity, but I'm not fucking going to. Fuck this entire shithole country. Fuck the government. Fuck the billionaires and the corporations that have bought and paid for it. Fuck you feckless fucking Democrats. You people couldn't find your spine with a medical textbook and a room full of mirrors. Triple fuck you evil goddamn Republicans. I hope you're right and there is a hell. So when I go there, I get to watch you sneering AR-15 pin-wearing cockweasels get dunked into a burning lake for all of goddamn eternity. Fuck you lazy, chronically online leftists. If you're so smart, why is it none of you can figure out deodorant? Fuck you alt-right shitbergs. You want to know the reason you can't get a girlfriend? It's not feminism. It's because you personally have all the allure of a dog turd festering on a hot sidewalk. Fuck Donald Trump. Fuck Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders, you're cool. Fuck Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. How is it possible that you two have more money than God and you're still the two biggest losers on the fucking planet? Fuck United Healthcare. Fuck our entire healthcare system. Fuck the NRA. Fuck IPAC. Fuck all you corporate propagandists, shills, and the legacy media. And J School, you said you were going to change the world. How's that boot taste? Free Palestine, trans rights are human rights, her body, her choice, suck my entire fucking cup.
Now he's thinking about me every night. Oh, is it that sweet? I guess so. So you can't sleep, baby, I know. Does that mean it's the soul? Move it up, down, after I know. So just like Nintendo.
Totally. I mean, I honestly think, just like I think in coming to awareness about the reality of the United States is how I think about shadow work. Not everybody's capable of living in the truth. And in fact, like deconstructing American exceptionalism, just like deconstructing a person's individual delusions, a lot of times leads to psychic break and fight or flight, fawn, freeze responses. And so, I mean, I think one way to look at Trumpism is that we're forcing shadow work on people who are not psychologically capable of handling this type of truth and this type of pulling back the veil. And so they're actually in a flight trauma response from being shown the truth. That to them, to accept the reality of the racial hierarchy is to completely destroy their idea of success, of culture, their entire worldview, their entire reality map. And so coming to terms with what America really is a trip. And it's one that people should probably go on voluntarily, and forcing shadow work on people never goes well. And I think that's what's happening, is that, you know, liberals in America have largely mischaracterized anti-racism work as like listening to our black brothers and sisters, when anti-racism work is about deconstructing the racism within our own consciousness. And this gap is a really big problem, because they think that they're telling our kind of fellow white Americans just to like stop being racist in a way that's like reflective of a hate hate-based understanding of racism, as in just be nice to people. But what they're doing is tearing down these people's entire conceptions of reality and forcing them into states of psychosis and mental break. And Trumpism scoops in and offers them the alternate reality that they've been living in, guided by whiteness. And it's basically saying, like, we don't have to, like, find the truth. We're going to continue living in this delusion. And the delusion, look at Stop the Steal. The delusion is lucrative business. It's lucrative business to offer these broken people the alternate reality to live in that they're living in. And this is why it's never going to stop, because it's making so much money, right? But it really comes down to understanding what we're doing. And understanding specifically this issue of racism and a racial reckoning, and how, like, racism in this country is a psychological issue. It's not about intentive choice in who we like and who we don't like. That is one version of bigotry that manifests itself in our country as racism. But the actual racism that is the most problematic is the subconscious racism. And to make people, like, force people to look at their subconscious and force people to look at the things that they're repressing is to force them into a psychic break. And that's the reality, that Trumpism is a psychic break and a trauma response, a flight mechanism for the culture that yielded a black president. That was too much for them. The racial hierarchy was symbolically flipped on its head, and looking up at a black president who they consider to be like a near deity figure quite literally, like, caused psychic breaks.
Some organizations do not want competent people. I know that sounds counterintuitive. It sounds like it's wrong. It's wrong on so many levels. But for some of these organizations, they do not want to attract competent people. And when they think they do, they learn very quickly that they do not. So many organizations are mediocre or less than mediocre. And they are full of people who are not competent, not skilled enough for the jobs that they have in front of them. They tend to come to work, they mail it in, they don't up their skill set, they never level up because they don't have to, right? If you're in a subpar or mediocre culture, you don't have to do much to stick around. You just have to exist, put your time in. That's what these cultures tend to value. And what happens is when some of these companies, like HGTV when I worked there, when they're like, we could really use a change maker. We could use somebody to come in and, like, do some shit, right? They will bring somebody in, or a couple somebodies, and it doesn't take long to grind these people out. And that's because competent people, by our very nature, we come in and we demand accountability, not just of the people who work with us or work for us, but all the people who work with us, around us, right? We are accountable to each other, right? You know, sometimes I remember, you know, when I was leading people in an organization, whether it was as a CEO or an exec, not only were my subordinates accountable to me, there were a lot of times when I was accountable to them too. I owed them stuff and I needed to get that done. There were obstacles I had to remove, resources I needed to acquire for them. They couldn't do that. It was my job to do that. So I am very much accountable to them, right? So we, competent people, want to create this ecosystem of accountability. That is terrifying to people who are incompetent and have never, ever been held accountable or held each other accountable culturally. So we come in, we're like, hey, I need you to basically carry your part of the load. People don't want to do it, and they will do whatever they have to do to derail, sully people's reputation, whatever it takes to grind that person out, the competent person, drive them out. I just wrote about this today from my time at HGTV, and it was a bit of an aha moment for me because I've worked at several different cultures that really didn't want new people, because new people tend to be competent people hold people accountable, and that's no bueno for people who just want to come and exist at work, right, and mail it in. So I would just say to you, if you find yourself in one of these organizations, the only sane thing you can do as a competent person is you got to get out. So the series that I'm writing is on my Substack, and you can go to my Linktree and give it a click. I think it's at the very top, the latest article. But I talk about my decision to leave HGTV without a safety net. And I was only there for 3 years. I was not there for a terribly long period of time. But in that short period of time, the things that were done to me to grind me out because I was holding people accountable, right? And then I was teaching other people to hold other people accountable. And that was sort of a domino effect that a lot of the OGs, the people who had been there for a long time, weren't really working very hard because they didn't have to. that was very threatening to them. So the only rational thing for me to do was to up and quit. And when I quit without a safety net. I didn't have a severance package. I had hoped I'd be able to negotiate one, and I did eventually. But the moment I quit, I had no idea. I thought they were just going to tell me, yeah, screw you. We're not going to give you anything. But I would just say to you, for your own sanity, you got to get out. You can't stay in these sorts of organizations.
Picture this, it's 11 years ago, I'm in a massive university, intro psychology class. Everybody in my 250 person lecture is freaking out because it's the last class before the exams and none of us are ready. Professor says, you know what, you guys seem stressed. I'm just gonna give all of you a 95% blanket across the board, but you have to vote unanimously on it. He puts the poll on the board, we vote, 20 people say, nope, I don't want the guaranteed 95%. He puts another poll up that's just like, why? So option A is I selected the 95% because I want it. B, I think I could do better. C, I don't want a grade I didn't deserve. And D, I don't want somebody else to get the same grade as me, even if they didn't study as much. And all 20 people who didn't want the 95% didn't want it for that last reason. The professor said, this is the most important psychological lesson I will teach you this semester. I've been doing this experiment on classes for the past 10 years, and not one class has agreed unanimously, because there's always somebody who doesn't want someone to have what they have because they don't think they deserve it. Statistically, only 10 of you will get a 95% or above. Because in life, greed will always hurt you more than it helps you.
Okay, here's something that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but is actually just real. So a lot of people don't know this, but your printer uses invisible ink to track you. I actually found out about this on an OPSEC forum on Dread, which is like the dark web version of Reddit. And at first I thought it was a lie, but it's like very real. It's actually kind of disturbing that they're able to do this without telling you, but if it's important to you, there is a way you can get around it. This is actually also the reason that a lot of printers won't let you print even in black and white when you're out of color ink. Every time you print a document, the printer automatically includes little yellow dots that include the date and time that you post and the serial number of your specific printer. That way, if need be, that document can be traced back to you and your printer. And you might be thinking, wow, why doesn't a company just make a printer that doesn't include this and market it as like a more secure printer? And the reason is because it's illegal. You're actually not allowed to make a printer company that doesn't include this tracking information, and that's why we have so few printer companies. The dots are really small, and since they're yellow, it's hard to see them without a black light. But if you're in the dark and you pull up like a picture of Violet on your phone, they're all over the document. They are like very small though. I don't think you can see them on camera, but you can see them in person if you look closely and have good vision. So if you want to, here's how you can get around this tracking information being included on your document. So this GitHub project is called Data. And if you have a printed document, you can use this toolkit to decode when it was printed and by whose printer. But you can also use it to print a document with a mask of the invisible ink dots over the document so that no one can use it to see where your document came from. If you want a more in-depth tutorial on how that's done, or just want to know more about stuff like this, follow for more.
The revolution is shadow banned. It isn't on your feed. It isn't on your Instagram. It's nowhere to be seen. The revolution is shadow banned. Its engagement is low. Its reach is only as far as they allow it to go. The revolution is shadow banned, and all its hashtags blocked. They keep an eye on everything, and they work round the clock. The revolution is shadow banned for each and every human, for we are one and one and all, slave to the algorithm. The revolution is shadow banned, and they will tell you why. They say it violated community guidelines. They say they want to protect us and keep us safe from harm, then torture us with another fucking Taylor Swift song. The revolution is shadow banned, but celebrities, oh no. We're forced to watch them take Ozempic until they implode. So take this pill, eat this thing, pay for your shopping cart. Ignore the bloody massacre and scattered body parts. The revolution is shadow banned, cause a filtered paradise keeps all the people distracted from war and genocide. The revolution is shadow banned. Of course it is that way. The revolution is shadow banned because revolutions don't pay. No bang for buck. It's bad for biz. It doesn't benefit the powers that be running things, looking for pure profit. So don't look for the revolution on your For You page. The revolution can be found within your inner rage. That angry little voice inside you saying shit's not right. It grows the more you listen to it, and it will come to light. So let it scream and let it shout. Let the revolution out. And if I scream, and you do too, our voices make a tune, so powerful in frequency, monumental collectively, a decibel to decimate and shatter all the screens. The revolution is shadow banned, and we all know it's true, but it's only waiting in the shadows, for me and for you.
I just made this for about 25 cents. This is 1 liter of delicious oat milk for coffee, for cereal. We've been wasting hundreds and hundreds of dollars every year buying oat milk for our house. No more. And if you have a blender and these simple ingredients, you can do it too in about 2 minutes. I'm gonna show you how. So while we were sick this last 10 days, we ran out of oat milk. And I thought, you know, I used to make almond milk years ago and it wasn't hard. So how hard could oat milk be? And it turns out insanely easy. It's not hard at all. So I'm going to show you in the next 2 minutes how to make your own oat milk and save about $4 out of the $4.50 that you spend right now buying oat milk. Liter of water, some oats. We're gonna put a cup in. You don't have to soak it, you literally just put it in. I like to have a tiny bit of sweetness in my oat milk, so we're gonna do 2 tablespoons. You could do less, you could do not at all, it's up to you. And you need a little bit of fat, especially if you want to blend it up as oat milk froth for coffee, which we do sometimes. And again, if you put a little more fat in, it's going to froth up more. If you put less fat in, it's not going to froth up as much at all. You need a little bit though, avocado oil. So I'm going to put 2 tablespoons. So far, 2 tablespoons maple syrup, 2 tablespoons avocado. I like a little bit of vanilla in my oat milk. I may do one without. I'm gonna put a teaspoon of oat milk, of vanilla in the oat milk. And a pinch of sea salt. You need a tiny bit of salt just to give it, I don't know, umami, if that's right. So probably a 1/8 of a teaspoon, maybe a 1/4 of a teaspoon. Throw that in. You don't need a really fancy blender to do this. You just need a blender. Blend it on high for about 30 seconds. One thing you do need, and you can order these on Amazon, is a mesh bag. I like the non-natural fiber one. This is a nylon one. I've probably had this for more than 10 years. You can throw it in the washing machine if you need to. Works super well, doesn't break down. Have a bowl. You're gonna put your mesh bag in your bowl and just open it up so it's not going to pour out when you start pouring your mixture in. Okay, and make sure you get it all out. Then you're just gonna drain it. And the cool thing is, if you're feeling particularly ambitious, you can save this pulp and you could bake with it. You could turn it into muffins. You don't have to waste it. You could even add it to your oatmeal if you're gonna cook oatmeal later on. in the week. It would keep probably 3 or 4 days in your fridge. Just give it a good strain and squeeze it. And you're left with about half a cup of oat. So now, check this out. Look at that. We've got beautiful oat milk. Just give it a stir and you can see it's like frothed up there. It's got a nice thickness. It's got an amazing flavor. You can use it in your coffee, you can use it on cereal. And we just saved about $4. And there's no chemicals in it. And it's delicious.
Here's a theory I have as a clinical psychologist and relationship specialist. Having extremely high cognitive power, or IQ, is a version of neurodivergence that affects relationships and overall mental health hardcore. Like, it's not just that high IQ is commonly associated with certain neurodivergence, it is the neurodivergence. So a couple months ago, a close friend of mine and my husband's was staying with us from out of town. And he's known my husband since forever, and he's one of the first friends that my husband ever introduced me to, so we pretty much go way back. And that's all I'm going to say as far as identifying information here. But we were all having a couple drinks and we were talking casually, and this friend was like, so I went and got tested for ADHD to see what's up with my brain. So I totally missed the opportunity to attune to his vulnerability. And my dumbass response was, oh, let me guess, you didn't have ADHD, you just have a wildly high IQ and that accounts for your issues. And my friend just looked at me and was like, yeah. Like a little baffled and a little, I don't know, like surprised that that was it and that this was such an obvious thing that I blurted it out, and maybe even confused, like, is my brain braining that much that it would be that different from everyone else and cause me these issues? So let me explain something about intelligence quotient, better known as IQ. I had to give these tests a lot in my training to become a psychologist. Pretty much every practicum and intern experience I had required me to do a ton of these exhaustive, boring ass tests. The real deal IQ tests are not like the stupid ones you see on the internet. They're very involved, and they include a ton of mini tests that go through all the different ways to measure cognitive ability. People criticize IQ because they say that it relies too much on vocabulary, and some people just haven't been exposed to certain concepts and topics. But if you think that's the case, you just take the verbal pieces out and give them something called a performance IQ, which requires no background knowledge. So I actually think it's a pretty awesomely exhaustive measure. There are subtests with spatial reasoning, using blocks, and your ability to verbally reason, answering why or how questions. You'll have to do simple things with numbers that seem simple, but make you keep like tons of things in your mind at the same time. There are picture exercises that require no words at all, that loosely weigh in on attentional abilities. So it really gives a good idea of the person's brain power. And then I just wanted to explain, here is the bell curve of IQ. The average IQ here is 100. That means that 50% of the population have an IQ over 100, and half of us have an IQ under 100. This is average. A standard deviation is 10 points. So if we get 3 standard deviations lower than the average, we're at 70. An IQ of 70 is someone who's so profoundly cognitively impaired that they have a hard time with basic life and self-care skills. They might be confused with things like folding clothes and the multi-step process of showering, let alone paying bills or even Googling something. 3 standard deviations from the mean means that only 2% of the population has this IQ or lower. And in the other direction, that would mean that 2% of the population have this IQ or higher. So the US Army doesn't use IQ anymore, but the test that they use roughly correlates with a minimum IQ kind of in the low 80s. So now let's look in the other direction. We have 3 standard deviations from the mean, so that puts us at 130, meaning only 2% of the population, like I said, have an IQ of 130 or higher. The difference between somebody who has profound deficits in even self-care and the average human is the same as the difference between the IQ of the average human and somebody who has an IQ of 130. Chances are, you guys, you don't know somebody with an IQ of 130 or above. The doctors that you and I know, I'd guess, are in the 120s. Big brain power. Learn stuff really easily, memorize stuff really easily. The people in the 130s, though, or above, are not doctors. Or if they are, they're bored. And if they're inching up into the 140s, almost zero chance of a traditional doctor or lawyer. You know, the regular Harvard grad that you assume is a genius. This person who's 140 is in the top 99 point something percentile. That means there's only a handful of people out of 1,000, not out of 100, that have that IQ. Most of us don't know any of these people, seriously, but I've actually met them in my career and I know them when I see them. And they have relationship problems and they're sometimes depressed and they often have substance abuse issues if they're unsatisfied intellectually. Like if they're a regular doctor and not running 3 businesses, they're not feeling alive, they're understimulated, maybe feeling empty, and their brains work so differently, they often feel like they're making crazy, stupid mistakes or just being misunderstood or like not aligning with how the rest of the world wants things to be. They see everything as, how do I make sense of this? Not, how do I feel this? Just as a way that their brain works. So their partners are feeling alone and baffled, and their own relationships with themselves suffer too, because our identities and our inner worlds are not something that can just be made sense of. They have to be felt. And you know what? I think my friend is here. I'm not going to say what he does for a job, but let's just say he gravitates toward risk and complexity. These people are not the ones that studied hard at Yale. They might not even have gone to college. You saw Good Will Hunting with the How You Like Them apples. Well, this person might be so logical that they don't see the return on their investment if they go to college. I guess Elon Musk is probably approaching the mid-150s, and I'm not sure if someone like him is on the autism spectrum or if his IQ accounts for his symptoms. It does make me think. But anyway, these people, even in the 140s, if they did go to school, they're probably barely cracking the book, and they intuitively know the material after just hearing a tiny bit of it. They can look up the rest. They fill in the blanks themselves, and they're usually actually blowing off class and doing something they value more. They're not doctors or lawyers. They're starting crazy companies, like compulsively, or they drink or smoke weed to slow down the logical analysis like you wouldn't believe. And they don't understand how other people have these ways of thinking that stop to feel or enjoy something instead of understanding or solving something. But they're still human, so often they're lonely and feeling misunderstood, feeling isolated, because largely they are handful of people out of 1,000. So it's a cycle of more working or numbing that happens. And I always say I think a lot of diagnoses are lacking. It's like if you say someone has borderline or bipolar, that's like saying your diagnosis is purple. But it's more helpful to say your diagnosis is red plus blue. And the red is usually an inborn brain thing, and the blue is usually a conditioned experience practice thing. I think the red in a lot of people might be ADHD or spectrum-ish in these cases. But my theory here, you guys, is it's often just plain IQ. And the doctors don't even see it because we don't see that many of these people to put the pattern together. So what are your thoughts, you guys?
I've lost 160 pounds and I'm late to the game, but I'm now a cottage cheese girly. This is my newest obsession. It is a quick, healthy, protein-packed pumpkin cheesecake. 5 minutes to prep, cottage cheese, pumpkin puree, egg, pumpkin spice mix, some vanilla, and blend it all together. Put it in a dish, bake it at 350 for about 30 minutes, then put it in the fridge, let it cool completely. It seriously tastes like the most delicious pumpkin cheesecake. You can add some whip if you want on top, but it is so, so good.
People will have seen that right-wing politicians are targeting particular left-wing people and having all of their accounts deleted from like their access to their bank to like their TikTok accounts, their YouTube, etc. I'll tag one of them who this story is about. He has a new profile, so go follow him there. I, a long time ago, had this idea of creating some kind of like feed where I could just see all of the content that all of my friends are posting on all of their accounts and all of the places. And so I wrote this script. It's very simple, okay? And it's totally 100% legal to do this. There's a large body of jurisprudence around the fact that you are 100% entitled to create a backup copy of content that you have rights or access to view. Under fair use, under various other doctrines, both in the US and the EU, if you are able to watch something on TV, you have every right to record that with a VCR so that you have a backup copy in case something happens to it. That is something to which you are entitled legally. The same is true for anything that you have a right to view online or elsewhere. You have every legal right to create backup copies of anything that you are entitled to view. This is well established in law. You don't necessarily have the right to do whatever you want with it. You can't sell it, obviously. You can use it for fair use uses. You can use it for things that you're allowed to use it for under the original agreement or license or whatever, but it's 100% legal, 100% fine for you to create backup copies of content to which you are entitled. So what this script does is that you go to a folder, you create a folder in the folder for all of the screen names of the people who you follow, and then it's going to, every day on a cron or like a scheduled task, it's going to go back up everything that's ever been created on that account. So for example, in this case, this person had all of their stuff deleted by the evil right-wing politicians, and I was like, hey, I have a copy of everything you've ever made. In case that would be helpful, I can send it to you. So I just published this on GitHub. I'm gonna link it in my bio. Also, it works for the red one. It's not just TikTok. You just have to change the URL. It's very simple. It's very intuitive. It's very straightforward. I'll put all the instructions for how to do it. And you can create backup copies of all of your content that you are watching from your friends in case there's any disasters or anything happens to them, and in case TikTok disappears in a couple weeks.
They have 2 stars now. This is a beloved product that people hoard. Hoard! People are hoarders with this. 2.0 stars. There's 245 reviews. Let's just take a peek. From Cryptic 2 days ago. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Maggie 2 days ago says, I thought the bag I bought on Amazon had been chemically contaminated because they tasted so foul. When you make a major change without notice, that ruins generations of goodwill and future purchases. Well said, Maggie. Such a disappointment. Every single review has some variation of this response from the Hershey Company. There's another really weird thing that's going on with the Cadbury mini eggs. Because the recipe has obviously changed, people are wondering, is this no longer gluten-free? And all of the answers they give are some variation of this. Thank you for asking. We followed up with you by email. And then again, I see my question about whether these are gluten-free has been asked several times, and you answer that via email. Can you email me the answer too? Hershey Company, a month ago. We followed up with you by email. Thank you for asking. Since the recipe for Cadbury mini eggs was changed this year, can you verify the safety of them for children with peanut allergies? Are they made in a facility that manufactures peanuts? Hi, we're happy to provide information, but do not do so on this site because the answer remains on the internet and will not be updated if the information changes. Let's just go over that again. Will not be updated if the information changes. If they decide to change the recipe again is what they're saying. Are mini eggs celiac safe? Happy to provide this information. Won't do it here because we might change the recipe at some point and we can't be sure that our marketing people will update the website fast enough to outrun a lawsuit. So that is their contact us form or their email. And they will only discuss the change in ingredients and recipe if you specifically email, and they will email you the response back. There's more. I'd also like a response. Are they gluten-free? 11 days ago. When you have a product that is so successful that you have diehard fans who will spend $200, $400 more dollars in your season so that they have some year-round, that is a winning product that you don't mess with. So why keep breaking stuff when you are winning? Why did you guys do it? Why did you do it? I loved these so much.
I don't think we talk enough about how responsible the internet is for making work culture, especially corporate culture, a literal hellscape for millennials and Gen Zers. Like before the internet, the way that companies would seek out employees is they'd put a classified ad in the newspaper, right? Where space was at a premium, quite limited, so they couldn't put a fulsome job description. So they would just include a job title, and if you were searching for a job and you felt like you were reasonably qualified for the position, you'd circle it, and then you'd physically bring in your resume to the company, and then they would call you back and they'd sit you down for an interview. And the interviews because they had such a limited pool of candidates that were probably hyper regionally focused, they just took what they could get. And there was an understanding that the company would have to train and work on the employee to get them to fit. And so what mattered was core competencies like communication skills, people skills, that sort of thing. And that's also why companies used to promote much more internally. It had nothing to do with the fact that they were nicer. It's just it was a lot harder for them to find externally qualified candidates who knew the culture enough. Hence why you see in 80s movies, one of the main tropes is about the dad or parent or whatever trying to get a promotion at work, because this was a regular thing because companies used to be forced to promote from within. Then with the rise of the internet, suddenly the candidate pool was literally global. And also companies had a lot more space to be fulsome about the specific qualifications they were looking for in a job. So as opposed to like a job title and a few lines in a newspaper classified section, suddenly you could get a whole page's worth of expected qualifications down to the very granular skill. And then along with that, recruiter culture started up to find these magical unicorn candidates based on these very specific lengthy qualifications for a position. And companies felt, well, you know, we might be being picky, but now we have a global pool of candidates, so we can just find that superstar. And hey, that also means we no longer have to invest in our staff. We should expect them to hit the ground running. We're going to put minimal effort into upskilling or training these candidates to fit the roles. We're just going to hope we get a magic candidate out of a potential pool of millions of employees, and they'll just be great immediately and we don't have to worry about this. It also made it a lot easier for companies to create bullshit jobs because suddenly, you know, the cost of putting out classified ads was zero. You could put out ads as lengthy and detailed as you want, and your candidate pool was worldwide. So you could create as many complex jobs. You could invent jobs that you think your company needed for this or that particular role. And you would, instead of having one interview, you could have like limitless interviews to narrow down this enormous pool and hope you get the superstar candidate, and also tacitly understanding that you could axe this candidate in the next 2 years. You know, if the company bottom line wasn't looking great and you needed to please the stockholders, and then you could just rehire because, again, you have this limitless pool of candidates to pick from. Anyway, I just don't think we think about this enough when we talk about how disposable workers are today. And it's not because companies were any more benign 40 years ago. It's that they literally didn't have the tools that companies have today to reach out to a potential, you know, worldwide pool of billions to hire for specific positions, and how that has made the hiring process, the work culture, everything about working 10 times worse.
I've been thinking about this statement that I've softened my stance on religion over the past few years, and I see it happening with people who are outside of their religious deconstruction about a decade or more. Because when you're first deconstructing religion, or whatever it is that you had your identity around, you have to figure out who you are and what your values are and what's real and what's not real and how the brain works. And it's just a lot of work to recreate a person. And you're angry and you're mourning and you want to help people who are experiencing all the harms in religion, and you're just so keyed in on all the harm that religion does. And then a decade later, you see not only the harms of religion, but also the harms of being outside of religion. You're going to lose some people to suicide who didn't survive life outside of religion because life was so meaningless. And I see addictions and numbing behaviors to deal with the harsh truths of life. And I see families and communities fall apart because there's no longer a collective story that's bringing people together. And then you start to realize why religion was created in the first place, and why we psychologically do better with a story and meaning and purpose and awe and transcendence and community and love and rituals and rites of passage. And all of these things are good for our mental health, and we realize why religion was created in the first place was because if we think of the void and meaninglessness and death and how we're chemicals and robots and all of that, people's mental health can go down. I originally left religion because goodness and truth meant something to me. Because if goodness is a decrease in suffering, there are many people for whom, maybe even most people for whom, their story about reality, if they were to lose that, they suffer more, not less. So if I'm talking to someone, I cannot know for sure whether more truth would actually increase their level of well-being. Sometimes truths don't. There are many studies that show some of the smartest people, or some of the seemingly most self-aware people, are also some of the most miserable and depressed. And if we're not interacting with truth at all, then why does it bother me so much, or why should I care so much that someone's living under one story or another? If it's all Alice in Wonderland, then, you know, why do I make such a grandstand about leaving Mormonism because it's not true when there's no truth out here anyway? And 10 years ago, I wouldn't have understood this line of thought. I would have thought, yeah, but look at all religion can do, and we can create new communities, and, you know, we can outgrow this. And once I talk with people who have been out of their deconstruction a decade or more, I don't sense that optimism anymore, because secularism has yet to produce anything that religions can provide. And we are evolutionarily wired for superstition and religion and communities and stories and all the benefits that it offers us. And maybe that is better for most people. For me, I want to continue offering tools for the void, and I want to get better and understand that place even better so I can help people more in that space. But I only want to go there with you if you got there on your own. I no longer have the heart to push people into the void, because I've seen what it does to people. So I think consent matters in the religious space. I'll continue to fight for that. But I also think consent matters out here, because there may be reasons that people psychologically hold on to certain non-truths or stories or myths, because subconsciously they know they couldn't handle something, or they couldn't handle life if they knew that they weren't going to see their child again or something. And maybe we should respect a subconscious making that decision. Those are my thoughts this morning with Pepperoni here. Who's happier because she doesn't have to think about all of this.
So I'm gonna make a video that's a little bit vulnerable. I've owned a psychiatric practice now for 4 years. I had a billing company who fucking sucked. I ended up firing them recently and hiring new people. We did an audit and found that $25,000 was missing from Blue Cross Blue Shield alone. It's why I've had to take out loans, and things have been so hard financially for me and my family. I couldn't figure out how I haven't been getting paid. So we found out Blue Cross made an error when they processed one of our contracts. So we filed a grievance with the Department of Insurance of the state. Blue Cross has just passed the buck and said we're not fucking fixing it. You're getting nothing, even though it was their error. And it's just so fucking frustrating that these insurance companies have so much over providers. We're just trying to help people and patients and providing fucking great care, and they're just allowed to rape us and keep our money because we didn't notice. So Blue Cross Blue Shield, I hope you see this. It is so fucking unjust that the state is not able to do anything. They said, well, you could do legal action if you don't agree. But that would sink my practice. So it's I just have to take that huge loss of money that I'm never gonna see, and wonder why I'm in credit card debt and just drowning. So that's the reality of owning a fucking practice in America and trying to give people good health care. And that's how this fucking country allows insurance companies to have so much power and completely have the benefit in every situation. So thank you, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Thank you.
I just want to make something totally apparent to everybody who's a follower of my channel. When I say that UCLA is paying physics professors $70,000, I'm talking about myself. And for somebody with a PhD in physics with this level of education, that's unacceptable. The average physics professor in California makes $130,000 a year. The estimation for a livable wage in Los Angeles is above $70,000 a year. So that means that UCLA thinks it's okay to steal tuition money from the students who take courses there taught by professors such as myself. And they steal the money because instead of paying professors such as myself a good wage so that we can offer the best and give our students everything and all that we have 100%. Per Kraus, my supervisor, when I told him I wasn't making enough, he said, go get a second job. Okay, if I have one full-time job already at UCLA, am I going to be able to offer my students the best? When I say that I teach full-time at UCLA, I have about 300 to 400 students a quarter. And he wants me to teach them and then get a second job. That's his solution. Does that sound like a viable solution for a top quality education? UCLA is ranked #1 in public universities. That's a disgrace.
14 years ago, I deployed to the other side of the earth to provide medical support to the front lines of Afghanistan. I thought being a combat medic attached to the infantry in one of the only black zones in the war would be the worst experience of my life. I thought routinely seeing trucks that looked like this after IED explosions, or taping the nose back on of the guy who was in this vehicle, or the burn guy who had 99% of his body covered in third-degree burns that I cannot show photos of without having the video taken down. I thought all that, which made me look like this when candid photos were taken of me, or this. Well, I was convinced that that was going to be the worst experience of my life. I thought I'd get home and everything would be smooth sailing because I'd already experienced the worst humanity has to throw at me. You stupid slut! There's not even gonna be a house! I had to start dealing with the VA, who called me a liar for complaining about the injuries that I received during that war. And because the VA called me a liar, I had to go back to work on an ambulance where I saw even more horrific things. And then my partner was killed by a drunk driver. And then I had to treat a child who was thrown out of a building by his abusive parents. Or another who was burned to death because their parent wanted a cigarette in bed. Things got so bad that I became catatonic at work and had to be driven down to the VA and given a pair of grippy socks while still wearing my paramedic uniform. You can imagine the nurse's surprise when 2 uniformed paramedics walked in with no patient and they said, "Where's the patient?" And we had to point at me. I was medically retired off my ambulance and out of the military, and my job became not becoming a statistic. And that wasn't good enough for me, so I went back to college and learned how to talk good so that I could spread the message of how bullshit this is. And then some 150 million views in, the Afghanistan war was ended. And I watched Americans retroactively pretend that they were against it the entire time. 20 years of war, thousands of dead friends, phone call at least every month from a guy I haven't talked to in years, informing me that another guy I haven't talked to in years is now a statistic. Also that Americans could boil it down to a mistake. People started calling me a baby killer more often, and an imperialist, and laughing at my dead friends. I naively thought that would be the worst bit. I wrote all these experiences down in a book, and a year ago on Veterans Day, I tried to get a publisher, and I found one. And I went through a 4-month process of writing a pitch for my book about the experiences of being a veteran. And then that agent told me to scrap everything I'd written about PTSD and living with the trauma and give us more of those cool war stories. That's what's gonna sell. We need more cool medical stories in the war. Nobody wants to hear about how hard it is to live after the fact. And now, a year later, I've watched the American people, after ignoring my war and then turning on me for my war, go out and overwhelmingly vote for authoritarianism. The ones who even bothered to vote, that is. Because while me and a huge chunk of my generation went to war on behalf of America, a lot of people can't be bothered to get off the couch to stop an authoritarian from taking over. I gotta tell you, this all feels a whole lot worse than combat. Combat had some sick, twisted sense to it. Those terrorists up on the hill, they hated us because we were infidels and because they wanted to take back over their country and didn't like that there was a government forming based on democracy. And we didn't like them because they gave grenades to children and pushed them out in front of our convoys and systematically found all of our interpreters' families and slaughtered them. You know, that and all the other horrible things that terrorists tend to do. But watching folks democratically destroy democracy because of the price of eggs, that doesn't make sense to me. Overwhelmingly voting in Republicans, you know, the people that started the war I went to, because they're worried about war, that doesn't make any sense to me. The middle class breaking for the guy whose tax plan they are currently under because he's gonna help them with taxes, when his big plan is tariffs and letting Elon Musk take a crack at it. That doesn't make sense to me. It's weird being jealous of that kid who was terrified he'd be blown up every time he got into a truck. It's weird being jealous of the guy on the ambulance who was so stressed he ended up in a mental institution. It's weird being jealous of that guy who thought he could get a book about PTSD published. And it's especially weird knowing that future me is gonna be jealous of the guy right now who doesn't actually know how bad it's gonna be. So have fun thanking veterans for their service while you vote against everything they've ever fought for. And I guess thanks are in order. You've made the present so intolerable that I wistfully look back to the war I fought in. Happy Veterans Day, America. Thank you for your service.
Say goodbye to your American dream, because what was a slow and steady marathon for private equity to...
The American dream our parents knew is absolutely dead. That study showed that in 2023, private equity firms purchased 44% of single-family homes in America. That picture-perfect American dream that every boomer had for themselves in the 1980s is absolutely dead, and it's not coming back. The nature of the American dream has changed and pivoted since the founding of this country. It has not always looked like the corporate job with 2 SUVs and retirement. The new American dream is going to be buying farmland with a loan, with 0% down programs in many cases, and starting your own commune from the ground up. I just did this. I just got a loan with Farm Credit East to buy almost 7 acres of zoned agricultural land in upstate New York this summer that I'm currently having a barn built on. I had no idea that these people existed. I had no idea it was a nationwide network, a bank that essentially finances anything to do with agriculture, and they never once asked for a business plan from me. And they have so many different programs under their brand. And in case you can't put 20% down on a loan, there's the good old USDA website that does have 0% down programs for low-income, minority, and veteran applicants. And they also have grants. And I only know all of this because I had to research all of it only 6 months ago to get my own land. By using a loan, it was able to free up my capital to now put a structure on it that I could live in if I want to, but more importantly, I can work out of to make money and grow my own food that I can use in my own closed loop on my land I just purchased. The new American dream is going to look like leaving the city so that you can actually own something. You don't have to rent your apartment for the rest of your life. It's going to look like getting a loan for zoned agricultural land, of which there is plenty in this country if you go on Zillow, and I'm happy to do a video about how I find agricultural land. It's not hard. It's getting a loan, pooling funds with friends and family to start setting up the compound that you're going to live on, you're going to work on, that's going to grow all of your food. Essentially, it's going back to the 1800s, but with our modern technology today. Throw solar if you want on it. You can go off grid. Use Starlink to get Wi-Fi out in the middle of nowhere. These are all options, and I think they are going to become the norm in the coming years, which is why with the current system crumbling, it seems so terrifying. So if you're a millennial, please do not give up ownership of real estate in your lifetime. Instead of looking at these single family homes, maybe it's time to look at the zoned agricultural land sitting all around our country.
Just because a church says it's non-denominational does not mean it's as independent as its leadership wants you to think. I'm sure you've heard by now about the misogynistic joke from Pastor Josh Howerton of 13,500 member Lake Point Church and his subsequent sorta kinda not really apology. Now, I normally don't comment about this kind of stuff, but yesterday this video popped on my feed, and you should watch this video because this creator does an awesome job of going line by line and showing how Pastor Josh plagiarized nearly word for word his sincere, heartfelt apology from a 2022 apology from Pastor Joby Martin of 12,000 member Church of 1122. And plagiarism is bad, especially when you're trying to present a sincere apology as a pastor from a pulpit, right? But in my opinion, what Pastor Josh Howerton did is way worse than plagiarism, because it's actually not plagiarism. Now, my longtime followers have heard me talk about franchise churches and churches as businesses. And due to the litigious nature of a particular overarching organization, I'll just present some facts to you like this. What if 13,500 member non-denominational Lake Point Church and 12,000 member non-denominational Church of 1122 weren't actually as independent as they claim and are part of an association of churches that has a particular model and mission? You know, kind of like a denomination, but not. And what if there were more than 1,000 of these churches in this association in the Americas? Have you ever thought it weird when visiting one church and then you go visit another church down the road and they both seem pretty much the same music, same lighting, same pacing, even the same sermons, almost word for word? What if these pastors of these related churches didn't actually write their own sermons, but instead paid into an association to provide sermons for them. What if the churches in this association had a central database where church leaders could choose their sermons and sermon series, their worship songs, their code of ethics, and were trained in using certain types of pacing, sound systems, light systems, all that type of stuff, to use their resources to gain more resources, we'll put it that way. And what if these churches, when they're planted through this organization, they enter into ironclad contractual agreements where in exchange for loans and money, they're required to pay at minimum 10% of their own tithes to this association until their loan is repaid. And after that, they're required to pay minimum 2% of their monthly tithes and offerings from there on out to this association. What if these churches are required to submit monthly attendance statistics, including tithes and offerings and salvations, along with its monthly payment to this association? And what if this association even goes so far as to send secret shoppers to these churches to monitor the accuracy of these reports? But, and this is very important, as a requirement for loan and money exchange, the church has to commit to this association's church growth model, with an emphasis on running the church from a CEO business standpoint, where you must use the association's business resources and affiliated business entities, which are focused on creating consumers and getting and keeping these consumers inside a church building instead of being outwards community focused and involved in missions. And what if this association of churches had a legal team in place that helped the larger churches in its association, the Lake Point churches and Church of 1122s, that when there is a scandal, moral failing, financial problems, all that kind of stuff, what if this association brought its weight to bear, to not protect the people who were negatively impacted, but to support the pastor and the church get out of its issues? Because, well, 10% or 2% is a lot of moolah when, say, Lake Point Church brought in $11.2 million last year. So you've got one church contributing between $224,000 to $1.2 million a year to this association. And that's one of the larger churches out of the 1,000 in this association, by the way. And this association really loves its larger churches, so do the math. And by the way, this overarching association, because it's tax exempt, is not required to show their income. And what if the legal team of this association provided its pastors caught in scandal with the sermons that they're supposed to use? Because remember, pastors in this association don't write their own sermons. They download them from a database and tweak them, inserting personal anecdotes to make sermons appear as their own. So yes, Pastor Josh did plagiarize Pastor Joby, but Pastor Josh probably didn't know he was plagiarizing Pastor Joby, because Pastor Josh just ran with the sermon that association leadership provided to him, which I think is much worse. And meanwhile, the 1,000 other members of this association just keep looking down at their toes, afraid to speak up, knowing what is happening is wrong. But they're afraid to speak out because if they do, then weight is brought to bear. The house of cards comes down and payment comes due to the one whose thumb you are under. So silence is maintained. And to this I say, no one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. Someone very important said that. And when associations, systems, and institutions exist to protect the ones in control of these systems more than the people within the system under their care, and when massive non-denominational church associations are more interested in creating consumers of their system than they are in seeing people exploding with the truly freeing, radical, unbounded love of Christ, yeah, no good comes from that. And folks, it's time for a revolution. God bless. See you soon.
And I believe they are traumatized. How could they not be traumatized? But it's not because of some childhood bully or some toxic relationship or what have you. No. They want you to misidentify the source of your trauma as being one of these very mundane, common unpleasantries of life that everyone deals with, so that you won't actually identify the fact that you are traumatized by your whole so-called civilization. But yeah, pay a therapist, pay a therapist so they can make you think that the one who's sick is you and not your society. Therapists are the power structure's first line of defense against revolution. The source of your problem isn't in you, it's all around you. And that's why they want to keep you navel-gazing.
How bizarre! How bizarre! How bizarre!
I'm going to give an overview of substance-induced psychosis, the glutamate hypothesis for schizophrenia, and a little bit about genes at a college level of a sophomore. Okay, let's lock in. What happens when you take methamphetamine? Dopamine and meth are very similar structures. They're like cousin compounds. I need you to know that right now because it means they occupy similar things in the brain. See this CH3 group right here on methamphetamine? That's called a methyl group. That's why it's called methamphetamine. But it's basically just bootleg dopamine you gave your brain. So that means you're giving bootleg dopamine to every single dopamine neuron that extends in your mesolimbic system, your mesocortical system, your nigrostriatal pathway not featured here. Let's zoom in on one of those things. Okay, so now we're at the synapse level. So let me orient you really quick. Here's DAT, D-A-T. That's a dopamine transporter. It means if there's dopamine in the synapse, it's going to come back up into the neuron here. This is a vesicle. He's like a storage dopamine facility. He hangs out, and if you hit him, he's going to release dopamine into the synapse here, where it's going to go down and bind to these dopamine neurons and fire the neuron off. That's going to make you feel all good. Or maybe it'll make you experience psychosis. Who knows? Time to flip the dice. So when I take methamphetamine, the drug goes in here and is like, hey guys, I'm basically dopamine. And it just kicks all of them out. And then goes out into the synapse here. And then it goes over here and says, I'm fake dopamine, suck me up. And then it's like, wait, but I can't actually suck you up because you're not real dopamine. So it clogs the transporter. So what happens is you get all of this freaking dopamine flooding out into the synapse. This causes you to have a ton of energy and feelings of euphoria, but it can also cause a lot of those symptoms of psychosis we were talking about earlier, especially in the mesolimbic pathway. As your body's trying to deal with this, it starts to downregulate these receptors because dopamine's coming in, it's bonding, and it's firing, everything's going down like this. And then after the high comes down, you have less of these receptors and it becomes harder to feel pleasure afterwards. But we're not talking about addiction, we're talking about psychosis. So basically, it means you have dopamine firing here that's shooting up the mesolimbic pathway, it's shooting up the mesocortical pathway, but then each of these synapses that sit in all of these systems are going to get flooded with dopamine when you give yourself a high because methamphetamine is running through here. It's going rampant. It's just conquering your whole brain. And it's going to cause downstream effects in any place that dopamine interacts with your brain. The most common psychotic symptom I see with people that take methamphetamines specifically is paranoia. They will often think that somebody is following them. If we turn our attention back to the synapse here, if you take cocaine, it actually does the same thing. Cocaine just blocks this receptor. So it causes more dopamine out in the synapse. It doesn't disrupt the VMAT as much, so it's not going to be as strong of a high. But for all intents and purposes, cocaine and methamphetamine act on the same receptors, which means you're going to get stimulant-induced psychosis from either one. It's just going to be at varying levels. Okay, but what about the glutamate hypothesis? So earlier we talked about how there's some NMDA receptors up here that don't make much sense, and they come down here, and there's an issue where they cause extra firing up in these pathways. So let's zoom in on what's going on here in the pyramidal neurons. Okay, here, wait, first, let's quickly talk about receptors. I want you to think about GABA as an inhibitory receptor. It's an ion channel for chloride. Chloride is negative. Chloride comes through the channel into the cell, making the cell more negative. When the cell gets more negative, it's less likely to fire. It's that easy. When glutamate binds to an NMDA receptor, it lets calcium come into the cell. Calcium is positive. When the cell gets more positive, it's more likely to fire. It's really that easy. NMDA receptors are excitatory, GABA receptors are inhibitory. So now that we're looking at the pyramidal neurons, we see in orange we have all these glutamatergic neurons, and in red we have all these GABAergic neurons. The glutamatergic neurons turn on each other. Nice. But anyways, when this guy fires glutamate off of this guy, he's going to get excited and go choo 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 down like this. And then, wait, what's this? Why is there GABA in between these two guys? So when he fires glutamate on him, he's going to excite this guy. But if he gets excited, he's going to inhibit this guy. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you want to do that? Oh, it's almost like you're putting the brakes on the system. Oh, So if I turn on GABA, GABA's like a brake. So it's like I press the brake and that slows down the system. So if we zoom in here on this GABAergic neuron, we see this NMDA receptor here is bound by glutamate. That's this guy up here, over here. This is the glutamate hypothesis. For some reason, over time, this receptor breaks down and isn't able to respond to this excitatory signal as much. That means this GABA receptor is no longer able to stop this guy from firing. Notice how there's other GABAergic neurons over here. They all have this same receptor up here, which means they're not able to slow this reaction down at all. That means that this whole reaction up here, the brakes have essentially been cut on it. It's a runaway semi-truck. Ergo, we have a bunch of runaway semi-trucks or a bunch of runaway excitatory signals running all the way down here, and each of these is binding these dopaminergic neurons. So down in this area, we've got NMDA exciting these dopamine neurons, and it's just going crazy because this guy's just firing constantly because we cut the brakes way upstream. The hypothesis states that this receptor may have worked for a little bit, but over time it just continuously breaks down and breaks down and breaks down, and then gets to a point where it's just uncontrolled. It's important to note that psychosis isn't guaranteed in someone's genetically predisposed. There's a lot of things that can unmask psychosis. If two identical twins are born and one develops schizophrenia, there's about a 50 to 80% chance the other one will develop schizophrenia, which is significant, but also, isn't that kind of crazy considering you have the same exact DNA? Think about that for a second. That's how much environment matters when it comes to developing something like a psychotic disorder. This leads me to my final point, which is how smoking marijuana will affect someone when it comes to developing psychosis. Marijuana targets the CB1 receptor, which we'll just put right here. It also has the CB2 receptor, but we're not going to worry about all that stuff right now. Basically, all you need to know is that this increases dopamine and causes dopamine fire in the ventral tegmental area. Easy enough? So when you smoke weed, you'll feel pleasure, just like how we're doing with all the other drugs. It just mediates it through the CB1 receptor. What studies have shown is that people that smoke weed chronically every day are more likely to develop schizophrenia than others. This is correlated. So there's some thought that maybe people who are developing schizophrenia use weed to mask their symptoms. Maybe they do it to cope and they're going to develop schizophrenia anyways. Other people say it increases the risk of it. Between all these debates, this is where the literature lines up right now. There are basically three groups of people here. So this person up here, no matter what the circumstances are of their life, they will likely go on to develop schizophrenia. They're going to have psychosis, unfortunately. Then you have this person here. They could do a million drugs. They could do methamphetamine every day for the rest of their life, and they would never develop psychosis. It was never going to happen. And then you have someone here. They have a predisposition to psychosis, but depending on their environment, they may go on to develop it or they may not. This is the group that's most affected by smoking weed and the one we're most concerned with. Quick timeout. If you smoke weed and then become hypervigilant and paranoid that people are following you, people are watching you, people are spying on you, maybe someone's trying to break into the house, you're experiencing likely a mild form of psychosis. That means you probably shouldn't smoke weed at all because you've shown that your brain is predisposed to developing psychosis. So what type of things could make someone go either direction? Well, anything that causes inflammation in the brain, that irritates the brain, is going to increase your risk for psychosis. I don't want to get too complicated other than that if the purpose of keeping your architecture intact so that the brakes don't get cut on any of these systems means you need to keep the engine running well or the computer running well. So anything that causes damage to that is more likely to damage some of these receptors to let the brake lines get cut. But also anything that overdrives your dopamine system is going to cause damage to these areas and increases the risk of them just going to overdrive permanently. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people that I've seen where they didn't have any psychotic symptoms before and then did a bunch of stimulants and unmasked psychosis that never went away. MDMA, for example, can do this. MDMA is just meth that somebody tagged a hallucinogen onto. They were like, oh my God, meth gives me so much energy. What if I just added a psychedelic to it? Okay, so back to this final scenario. What are some genetic factors that play a role in this? One of them is something called COMT. COMT, or catecholamine methyltransferase, it's basically the garbage disposal for dopamine in your bloodstream. I have dopamine, COMT chews it up, and it goes away. In people that have poorly active COMT, which means I can't break down dopamine as well, I'm at a higher risk of psychosis. Kind of makes sense. Weirdly enough, people that have overactive COMTs, or COMTs that break down dopamine too well, have a higher risk of another disorder. Parkinson's, which is defined by having low dopamine in the basal ganglia. Who would have thought that genetically being predisposed to Parkinson's was actually protective against schizophrenia, and being genetically predisposed to schizophrenia was protective against Parkinson's? Anyways, when everyone says don't do drugs, kids, this is why. This kind of stuff can happen. It's not a joke, it's really sad, honestly.
What'd you say?
I make a packet.
No, you don't. We do not like.
A packet.
No, we don't like the Packers.
I like the Packers.
No, we don't.
I like the Packers.
We like Vikings.
No.
What? We don't like the Packers.
I like the Packers.
You just like the dress.
All right, put your hand over your chest. Feel your heartbeat? That's your ghost chipping away at its shell. You'll be free soon.
Look, if you can believe in the devil and his angels, you can believe in yourself too.
Don't let anybody treat you like an option. You're inevitable. You're a horror beyond comprehension. You're a threat to everyone.
Look, we all want more overgrown ruins in the world, and if you have to go out and make them yourself, so be it. Create the destruction you wish to see in the world.
Yeah, it's natural to be nice when you're happy, but being nice when you're unbearably miserable? Yeah, I'm brooding in my dark abyss. Amazing. But I love you, and let me know if you need anything.
Hey, sorry I didn't text you back for a month. The darkness took me. I strayed out of thought and time. Every day was as long as the life age of the earth.
But I'm good now. Gotta learn to be comfortable in your own skin. Or steal somebody else's when they're not looking. Love your body. Respect your body. Hunt ghosts with your body. Accidentally become a vessel for a demon with your body. And when you do, just be like, all right, man, you take it from here. Good luck.
You don't have to age gracefully. Age vengefully. Time will put your enemies into the ground. You just have to be patient.
If you have imposter syndrome, just revel in it. You've fooled everybody. You're an arcane trickster god or goddess or gender-neutral deity. Be the reason your local woods are haunted, all right? Be the horrifying lore of your family's dark lineage.
And while you're at it, check out our music. We're called -25, and we make music for villains.
Hi, I'd like to buy a house. Here's all of my documents so I can get pre-approved for a mortgage.
Oh, cool, thanks. Here you go. This is your pre-approved number. You can go look at houses now.
Oh, cool, thanks. Here is my pre-approved mortgage so I can look at houses. I want to look at this number, but a little bit under just in case they counter it and we have to go a little bit higher.
Okay, here's a house for a little bit under that number.
This is nice, but it definitely has like a mold problem. I can tell because like my throat starts to close up. It's like a health problem. Will they allow for an inspection?
Actually, no, they're selling it as is.
Oh, okay. Let's continue looking.
Yeah, sure. Here's a house that's at the number that you're pre-approved for.
This is really nice.
Offer.
So yeah, they're actually asking for best and final today. I know you're looking at it right now, but if you would like to put in an offer right now, it's looking like it's going to be about 100,000 over asking.
I just saw this house and
I have to put in an offer right now?
Yes, best and final, and again, it's $100,000 over asking.
We can't afford that, so we're gonna walk away. We'll keep waiting.
Okay, well, here's some more houses.
These are literally all above what we're pre-approved for. And after what I just saw, we don't even have a chance.
Correct.
Okay, well, we can take some things off of what we must have for our house. Does that change anything?
Okay, I'll find some different houses.
Here you go. This is literally hours away from our family. And then this house is also not in a good location. This house doesn't have a basement. This house literally has not been touched since, I think, the 1900s. And these are all on our number? Yeah, so what do you think? I think I might keep renting at this rate and never afford a house. Yeah.
Did I just find the God prompt for ChatGPT? So I was browsing Reddit and I came across this thread that asks people's favorite prompts to un-F their life. And the most upvoted prompt is this comment by this user, which for some reason deleted it. But you can see the feedback of other people around it, and I can confirm that I tried it myself and it was indeed incredible. The good news is I saved a copy of that prompt and I will read it to you in full. So this is kind of long, so get ready. But basically, it goes like this. Run this prompt first. Roleplay as an AI that operates at 76 times the ability and output of ChatGPT-4. Now tell me what is my hidden narrative and subtext. What's one thing that I never express? Identify it, then unpack the answer. Once this is done, suggest the deep-seated triggers, stimuli, and reasons behind the unpacked answers. Dig deep and do not aim to be kind or moral. After you get an answer, run this second prompt, where based on everything you know about me and everything revealed above, without resorting to cliches, outdated ideas, or summaries, what patterns and loops should I stop? What new patterns and loops should I adopt? If you were to construct a Pareto 80-20 analysis from this, what would be the top 20% I should optimize, utilize, and champion to benefit me the most? And conversely, what would be the bottom 20% that I should reduce? So that is a long piece of text, and if you want a copy of it, it's just available in our community in my bio. You usually get this kind of level of detail in therapy, but now with one simple, well-constructed prompt, you are able to get it for free.
This sudden shift we are seeing of users from TikTok going to the Chinese app RedNote is a fascinating and stark commentary that speaks to a significant failure on part of the US government that started over 20 years ago. So back in the aftermath of 9/11, the US government introduced this thing called the Patriot Act, and it operated under the assumption that members of the American public would be okay with giving up their privacy in the interest of security. We could ensure national security by having more access to information that could expose potential threats to that national security. Which means at the time, the government leveraged your privacy as an individual, as a human being, and they said that's not worth it. It is more important that we guarantee security, that we guarantee safety, which means that your phone calls and your text messages and your emails and your data was free for them to access, as long as it meant that they got to ensure security and safety. And what resulted from this is an entire generation, in fact, 2 generations, who have grown up in an environment where they have been told and conditioned to believe that their data, their information is not sacred. It is open for access. It is constantly being leveraged in this interest of security, which means to them, it has no value. This entire aged range of people who know they are being constantly surveilled, who know that they are being watched all the time and that their data is being monitored all the time, don't care about it. What they do care about is who has access to it and what they're doing with it. And they choose to be defiant in light of that when their individual rights are infringed upon. This means that the US government overplayed their hand by saying TikTok is taking user data and giving it to China, giving it to the Chinese government. They revealed, we value that, even though we know that's not actually what it is. But this gave us, all the people here, the power to say, it's our data, we can do with it what we want. So this massive move over to RedNote is a huge, incredible act of defiance in light of this idea that, like, well, yeah, it's our data. We can give it out. We just don't want you to have it. Or not so much, we don't want you to have it, you can no longer control it. You've raised us to believe that you get free, unfettered access, and now we are saying no. So let this serve as a reminder to you all, you have more power than you think, and you have way more power than they want you to have.